You checked your bank account again this morning, didn't you? Not because you needed to, because some part of you needed to make sure the number was still there. That habit says something no financial advisor ever bothered to explain. You've been told your whole life the problem is simple. Earn more, spend less, and yet here you are, 40-something years old, maybe more, with a career behind you, raises you fought for, promotions you earned. And somehow, the gap between your paycheck and your peace of mind never closes. You're not bad with money. You've read the books, you've made the budgets, you've cut the coffee, canceled the gym, skipped the vacation, and still one emergency away from panic. Tonight, I want to show you why that happens. Not because you're careless, not because you're weak. There's a mechanism running underneath your life, quietly resetting itself no matter how much you earn. I call it your financial thermostat, and once you see it, you'll never look at your bank account the same way again. Let's stay with that word for a moment. Thermostat. You know how it works in your house. You set it to 70 degrees. The room gets a little cold, the heater kicks in, the room gets a little warm, it shuts off. It doesn't matter what season it is outside. It doesn't matter if it's freezing in January or blazing in July. The thermostat pulls the room back to the number you set, every single time. Now think about your money the same way. Somewhere back in your 20s, or maybe even earlier, watching your parents, your first job, your first apartment. Somewhere back there, a number got set. Not a number you chose on purpose, a number your nervous system chose for you, based on what felt normal, what felt safe, what felt like enough, but not too much. And here's the part nobody tells you. That number doesn't move just because your income moves. You got the raise you'd been chasing for 2 years. For about 6 weeks, it felt different. The extra breathing room felt real. And then, without you noticing exactly when, the money found new places to go. A slightly nicer car, a subscription here, a dinner out that used to be for special occasions, now just Tuesday. 6 months later, you're checking your account with the same tightness in your chest you had before the raise. That's not bad luck. That's not bad math. That's the thermostat doing exactly what it was built to do. Pulling you back to the temperature you set decades ago, before you even knew you were setting anything. I want you to sit with that, because it changes everything about how you see your own habits. You've probably spent years blaming yourself for this, calling yourself undisciplined, telling yourself if you just tried a little harder, budgeted a little tighter, you'd finally get ahead. And every time you failed to get ahead, that blame got a little heavier, a little more personal. But willpower was never the right tool for this. You cannot outwork a thermostat by trying harder in the room. You have to go to the wall and change the setting itself. Here's where it gets uncomfortable, in a good way. Most people at your stage of life, and I mean this with real respect, not judgment, have never actually looked at the setting. They've looked at the income. They've looked at the expenses. They've made spreadsheets, cut subscriptions, skipped lattes. All useful. None of it touches the thermostat. The setting was built by watching. Watching how your father talked about money at the dinner table. Jaw tight, voice low, like it was something shameful. Watching your mother hide purchases or apologize for them. Watching what happened in your house the one time money was truly, frighteningly scarce, and what your body decided right then about what enough would always feel like. None of that was your fault. You were a kid reading a room, doing what kids do, building a map of the world out of whatever adults handed you. But that map is still in your hands today, at 40-something, guiding decisions you think are purely logical. You tell yourself the car needs to be replaced. Maybe it does. But ask yourself, honestly, when was the last time you upgraded something not because it broke, but because staying at the old version made you feel like you were falling behind people you compare yourself to without ever admitting it out loud? That's lifestyle creep, and we'll get into its mechanics soon. But underneath lifestyle creep is something even older. It's the thermostat, protecting a version of normal that was decided for you before you were old enough to vote, let alone invest. Here's the strange comfort in all this. If the setting was learned, it can be relearned. Not overnight, not with a single video, but the fact that your spending resets itself automatically means the mechanism is teachable, which means it's changeable. That's the door we're walking through together tonight. Think about someone you know, maybe it's you, who inherited money, or won a settlement, or sold a business, and within a handful of years, found their way back to living paycheck to paycheck. People shake their heads and call it carelessness. But usually it's a thermostat set so low that any money above the setting felt foreign, until enough got spent or given away to bring the temperature back down to what felt like home. And on the other end, think about someone who keeps landing on their feet no matter what happens. Job loss, a bad year, a crash. People call that luck too. It isn't. Their thermostat is simply set higher. Setbacks don't shake their sense of what's normal, because normal for them was built on a foundation of safety. Neither of these people is smarter than you. The difference sits in a setting most people never learn exists, let alone learn to adjust. So here's the question I want sitting with you for the rest of this video, quietly, in the background, while we go deeper into the mechanics of how this actually works in your daily life. The coffee, the subscriptions, the buy now, pay later button that appears at checkout like it's doing you a favor. What temperature did you inherit, and who set it? Let's talk about the coffee. You've heard it 1,000 times. Some finance guru on a stage, pointing a finger at the audience, telling everyone that if they'd just stop buying $5 lattes, they'd retire millionaires. It sounds tidy. It sounds like discipline. And it is, almost completely, a lie. Not because the coffee is free. It isn't. But the coffee was never the problem. It's a symptom, a small, visible symptom of something bigger happening underneath, in places you're not even looking. Here's what I mean. Pull out your phone right now, or hold this thought if you're driving, and think about your monthly subscriptions. Not the big ones you remember, the small ones. The streaming service you signed up for during a show everyone was talking about 3 years ago that you haven't opened since spring. The app you downloaded for a free trial and forgot to cancel. The membership you keep meaning to use starting next month. The cloud storage plan you upgraded once and never downgraded. Most people your age are paying for somewhere between 8 and 15 of these. Quietly, automatically. Every single month, without a single conscious decision being made. I call these ghost subscriptions because that's exactly what they are. They're not spending you chose. They're spending that chose itself, then went invisible, haunting your account balance every 30 days while you blame yourself for a coffee habit that costs a fraction as much. Add them up sometime. Actually add them up. Most people are stunned to find they're bleeding somewhere between $80 and $200 a month on things they forgot they were paying for. That's not a coffee problem. That's an attention problem, engineered by companies that understand something about human psychology most of us never think to question. They know canceling something takes effort. They know that friction, even small friction, 3 clicks instead of 1, is enough to keep millions of people paying for things they don't use. That's not an accident. That's a business model. But ghost subscriptions are only the beginning. There's something quieter, slower, more dangerous sitting right beside them. Lifestyle creep. You know the feeling. Somewhere along the way, nice became normal. The restaurant you used to save for a birthday became a Friday habit. The car you once thought of as a splurge became the car you'd feel embarrassed to be seen without. The vacation that used to be a once-in-5 years event became something you plan every year because everyone around you seems to be doing it. Here's the trap. None of these choices feels irresponsible in the moment. Each one seems reasonable. You earned it. You worked hard this year. And you did. That's not in question. What's in question is the pace. Lifestyle creep doesn't arrive as one big decision you could evaluate and reject. It arrives as 40 small decisions over 3 years, each so small it never triggers alarm. Until one day you look at your income. Genuinely good income. Income your younger self would have called made it money. And you cannot explain where it goes. I've sat across from people, good people, careful people, who make more than 90% of the country, and still feel the same tight chest at month's end that they felt in their 20s, making a fraction of what they make now. That's not coincidence. That's the thermostat, working through lifestyle creep, keeping the temperature exactly where it was always set. And then there's the third villain, hiding in plain sight at nearly every checkout screen you encounter now. Buy now, pay later. It shows up gently. 4 easy payments. No interest, they say, if paid on time. A button sitting right next to the regular checkout option, dressed up like a convenience, even a kindness. And in isolation, one purchase split into 4 payments doesn't feel dangerous. It feels smart, even. But here's what almost nobody tracks. Most people using these services aren't using one at a time. They're layering them. 3, 4, 5 separate installment plans running simultaneously from different purchases at different retailers, each one draining $20 or $30 on different days of the month. None large enough alone to notice. All of them together large enough to explain exactly why the account feels tight before the next paycheck lands. These systems were not built by accident to feel invisible. They were built by companies that hired the smartest behavioral psychologists money could buy, specifically to make spending feel weightless. Every friction point was studied and removed on purpose, because friction is the one thing standing between an impulse and a completed purchase. So when someone tells you the problem is your coffee, feel something close to anger. Not because coffee is innocent, but because that advice keeps your eyes on the smallest, most visible expense in your life, while the real leaks, ghost subscriptions, creeping normal, invisible installment payments, quietly drain you every month, completely unexamined. The coffee was never the problem. It was the flashlight pointed in the wrong direction, and somebody handed it to you on purpose. Now let's go one layer deeper, because the coffee, the subscriptions, the installment payments, none of that happens in a vacuum. It happens inside a system. And that system was not built with your financial peace of mind as the goal. I want to be careful here, because this isn't about conspiracy theories or men in dark rooms plotting against you. It's simpler than that, and in some ways more unsettling. It's about incentives, and incentives explain almost everything. Once you know where to look, think about your bank. Not the tellers, not the branch manager who remembers your name. They're not making these decisions. Think about the institution itself, the business behind the building. A bank makes money largely through two things: fees and interest on debt. Overdraft fees, late fees, interest on credit card balances that carry month to month. Interest on loans. Every one of these revenue streams depends, in some way, on you not having quite enough cushion at the exact moment you need it. Now ask yourself an honest question. If a company's revenue depends on you occasionally running short, is that company structurally motivated to help you build a cushion so large you never run short again? Sit with that, because I'm not saying anyone at your bank wishes you harm. I'm saying the system rewards a certain outcome, and systems, over time, tend to organize themselves around what gets rewarded. That's not malice. That's just how incentives work, in banking and everywhere else. Look at how checking accounts are structured. Overdraft protection sounds like a safety net, doesn't it? A kind gesture, covering you when you come up short. But look closer. That protection often comes with a fee of $35 or more, charged the moment your balance dips below zero, sometimes multiple times in a single day if several small transactions clear before you notice. For a $5 coffee that pushed you $6 into the negative, you can end up paying $35 in penalty. That's not protection. That's a toll booth, positioned exactly where people are most vulnerable. Now think about credit cards, and picture this, because most people never do the math on what they're actually looking at. The minimum payment on your statement. That small number in the corner, designed to look manageable, designed to feel like you're handling it. Pay only the minimum on an average credit card balance, and you could spend well over a decade paying it off, handing over more in interest than the original purchase ever cost. The minimum payment isn't a mercy. It's a mechanism engineered so the debt lingers as long as legally possible, generating interest the entire time. And here's the part that stings. If you let it, the minimum payment button is usually the biggest, easiest one to click. The option to pay in full or pay more often takes an extra step, an extra screen, an extra moment of friction. Just enough friction to nudge millions of people every month toward the option that benefits the lender the most. This is the environment you've made decisions in your whole adult life. Not neutral. Not designed for your benefit. Designed, at every turn, to make debt feel light and savings feel like an afterthought. Buy now, pay later. Companies didn't invent this playbook. They perfected it for a generation raised on convenience. No credit check for small purchases. No interest. As long as you don't slip. It feels like nothing until you're carrying 5 of these plans at once and a $14 coffee purchase turns into 4 easy payments of $3.50 because splitting a $14 coffee into installments somehow started to feel normal instead of absurd. I'm not telling you this so you'll be angry at your bank, or cancel your cards, or move your money under a mattress. Anger without direction just burns you. I'm telling you this so you'll finally understand something crucial. You were never simply undisciplined. You were navigating a maze designed, brick by brick, fee by fee, to be slightly harder to escape than it needed to be. Once you see the maze for what it is, you stop blaming yourself for getting lost in it. That's the moment real change becomes possible. Not because the maze disappears, but because you finally have a map. There's one more piece worth naming, because it's the quietest one. Rewards programs. Cashback, points, miles, dressed up as a gift for spending money you were going to spend anyway. Research on spending behavior consistently shows people spend more, not less, when a reward is dangled in front of a purchase. The 2 or 3% you earn back rarely outweighs the extra spending the reward itself encourages. You're not beating the system with points. Often the system is using the promise of points to beat you. None of this means banks are evil or that credit is your enemy. Used with clear eyes, these tools can genuinely work for you. But clear eyes require knowing what you're looking at. Most of us were never taught to look. We were handed a checking account at 18, a credit card at 21, and left to figure out the rest by trial, error, and whatever fees quietly taught us the hard way. That ends tonight, at least in your mind. From here forward, you're not just a customer moving through someone else's carefully designed maze. You're someone who can finally see the walls. Let me tell you about the rule that actually broke the cycle for me. Not a theory. Not something I read in a book and repeated because it sounded smart. Something I built out of frustration, at a kitchen table, at 11 at night, staring at a laptop screen with a number on it I didn't want to look at. I'll call it the 72-hour rule, because that's exactly what it is. Simple enough to explain in one sentence. Any purchase over $100 that isn't a bill, isn't food, isn't something already budgeted, wait 72 hours before I'm allowed to buy it. That's it. No app, no spreadsheet, no complicated tracking system that falls apart after 9 days like every other plan I'd tried before. Here's why it works, and I want to walk you through the mechanics, because understanding why something works is the only way you'll actually keep doing it once the motivation from watching this video fades, which it will by Thursday, if I'm being honest with you. Most of our spending isn't planned, it's triggered. You see something, an ad, a friend's new kitchen renovation, a colleague's vacation photos, and something in you responds before you've had a single conscious thought about it. That response feels like desire. It feels like, I want this. But it's usually closer to a reflex, a flinch, dressed up as a decision. The 72-hour rule doesn't ask you to resist the flinch in the moment, because resisting in the moment is exhausting, and exhaustion is exactly why willpower fails. Instead, it just asks you to delay the purchase, not cancel it. You can still buy it. You're just not allowed to buy it right now. And here's what happens almost every single time. Once you actually try this, about 60 to 70% of the purchases I flagged for the 72-hour rule, I simply forgot about or lost interest in once the initial emotional spike wore off. Not because I was disciplined, because the desire itself was never really about the object. It was about the feeling in the moment. Boredom, stress, comparison, a bad day that needed something to fix it fast. Give that feeling 72 hours to pass on its own, and it usually does. The other 30 or 40%, the purchases that survived 3 days and still felt right. Those I bought, without guilt, without the small voice second-guessing whether I was being irresponsible. Because by that point, I knew the desire wasn't a flinch. It had passed the test. It was a real decision, made by the version of me that thinks clearly, not the version reacting to a bad Tuesday. Let me give you a real example, because principles without stories tend to slide right off the mind. There was a jacket. Nice one. Leather. The kind you tell yourself you'll wear for the next 15 years, which somehow always makes an expensive purchase sound like a bargain. $280. I had it in my cart. My thumb was actually over the checkout button, and I made myself wait. 72 hours. Wrote it on a sticky note on my monitor, because if I'm honest, I didn't fully trust myself not to just click through anyway. Day 1, I still wanted it. Thought about it twice. Day 2, I thought about it once in passing while doing something else entirely. Day 3, I opened the cart again, mostly out of curiosity, to see if the feeling was still there. It wasn't. Not really. I looked at the jacket and felt almost nothing. No pull, no story about the 15 years I'd wear it, no image of myself looking sharper, more successful, more put together. Just a jacket. A nice jacket, sure, but not a jacket I needed, and definitely not one that felt worth $280 anymore. I closed the tab, and here's the part that actually mattered. I didn't feel deprived. I felt clear, like I dodged something, not missed out on something. That's the shift this rule creates over time. You stop experiencing restraint as loss. You start experiencing it as clarity, arriving right on schedule, 72 hours after the noise fades. Now, I want to be honest about something, because I promised you at the start of this video that I wouldn't sell you easy answers. This rule alone did not fix my finances. It wasn't a magic switch. What it did was something more foundational. It interrupted the automatic loop for the first time in years. It created a gap between impulse and action. And in that gap, for the first time, I actually got to choose. Not react. Choose. And once you've felt that gap, even a handful of times, something changes in how you relate to money altogether. You stop feeling like spending is something that happens to you. You start feeling like it's something you do, on purpose, with your eyes open. Try it this week. One purchase over $100. Write down the date. Set a reminder for 72 hours later. Don't cancel it. Just wait. You might be surprised by how much of what feels urgent right now doesn't feel urgent at all 3 days from now, once the noise in your head finally goes quiet. I've had people tell me the number should be different for them, a week instead of 3 days, or 48 hours if 3 days feels unbearable. Fine. The exact number matters less than the principle underneath it. You are allowed to separate the moment of wanting from the moment of buying. That separation, small as it sounds, is where most of your financial freedom actually lives. I want to talk to you about someone you probably know. Maybe it's a sibling. Maybe it's a friend from college. Maybe, if you're honest, it's you. Someone smart. Genuinely smart. Not the kind of smart that just talks well, but the kind that solves real problems for a living. Someone who works hard, who shows up early, who's respected at their job, who could explain complex things to you if you asked. And somehow, at 45 or 50, that same person is still one bad month away from real trouble. If intelligence and effort were the answer, this person would have solved it years ago. They haven't. And the reason isn't what you think. Here's the uncomfortable truth I promised you. Money management and money psychology are two completely different skill sets. You can be a genius at one and still struggle with the other because they were never built by the same part of you. Think about it this way. Being good at your job means being good at solving problems that have clear rules. A doctor follows protocols built on evidence. An engineer follows physics that doesn't change depending on how anxious they feel that day. A teacher follows a curriculum. These are logical systems, and smart, disciplined people tend to master logical systems quickly, because that's exactly the kind of challenge their mind was trained, and often rewarded, to solve. Money isn't like that. Money looks like a logical system. Numbers, percentages, interest rates. But underneath the numbers, every financial decision you've ever made was filtered through an emotional operating system that was installed decades before you understood what interest even meant. That's why you can explain compound interest perfectly to your kid and still carry a credit card balance yourself. That's why you can build a 5-year strategic plan at work flawlessly and still have no real plan for your own retirement. It's not a contradiction. It's two different systems, running side by side, rarely talking to each other. Let me go deeper, because I think the real relief lives here, if you'll let it. Every financial decision you've made was shaped by an emotional inheritance, not money itself. The feelings around money, passed down like a language you didn't know you were fluent in, until you heard yourself say the exact words your father used to say, in the exact same tone, about a bill sitting on the counter. Maybe you grew up watching money arrive and disappear in the same week, and some part of you decided, quietly, that money was never something to trust. So you spend it fast now, as if getting rid of it removes the threat of losing it later. Maybe you grew up watching money get hoarded, hidden, never discussed, treated like a secret shame. So you avoid your own accounts today, avoid checking your balance, avoid opening the mail, because looking feels dangerous even now, even though you're the adult in the room. Maybe money was used as love in your house, a gift instead of an apology, a big purchase instead of a real conversation. And now, 40 years later, you still buy things for people you care about when what you actually want to say is harder to say out loud. None of this makes you broken. It makes you human, shaped by a story that started long before you had any say in writing it. But here's where the smart, hard-working part of you actually becomes the obstacle. And I want you to really hear this, because it's counterintuitive. The same intelligence that makes you excellent at your job can talk you out of feeling your financial fear. You're skilled at rationalizing, skilled at building a logical case for a decision your gut already knows isn't wise. I deserve this. I'll make it back next quarter. This is an investment in myself. Sometimes those sentences are true. Often, for people at your level of capability, they're a sophisticated disguise for the same old thermostat, defended with better vocabulary than most people have access to. I've watched brilliant people build entire justifications, complete with spreadsheets and projections, for decisions that were really just old fear wearing a suit. So if you've spent years wondering why you, of all people, capable, respected, the one everyone else comes to for advice, still feel this particular kind of stuck, I want you to consider a different question than the one you've been asking. Not, what's wrong with me? Instead, what did I learn to believe about money before I was old enough to question it? And is that belief still doing its job, or just doing damage? That question doesn't have a quick answer. It's not supposed to. But asking it honestly, even once, tonight, is worth more than another spreadsheet ever will be. There's a second layer worth naming, because it explains something that confuses a lot of capable people. Shame keeps this whole cycle running in the dark. When money is tangled up with self-worth, every mistake feels less like a math error and more like proof of some deeper flaw. And when a mistake feels like proof of a flaw, the natural response is to look away as fast as possible. That's why so many smart people avoid their own numbers, not because they can't understand them, because looking closely feels like confirming something they're afraid is true about themselves. That avoidance isn't laziness, it's protection, misapplied to the wrong problem. Once you see it that way, you can finally treat your finances the way you'd treat any other skill you respect, with curiosity instead of judgment, and patience instead of shame. If you're still here with me, this deep into the video, I want to say something before we keep going, because it matters to me more than the algorithm ever will. Most people click away in the first 2 minutes. You didn't. That tells me something about you. That you're not looking for a quick fix or a clever trick to screenshot and forget. You're looking for something that actually holds up. Something you can carry out of this video and into Monday morning, when the noise of daily life tries to pull your attention right back to where it always goes. So if this is landing for you, if any of this is putting words to something you felt but never quite said out loud, I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel and to come back and sit with me here every day. Not because a number on a screen matters to me. It doesn't, not really. What matters is that this conversation continues, that the next video builds on what you just heard, instead of starting from zero every single time. And I want to ask you something honestly in the comments below once this video ends. Not, did you like this video? Something more real. Tell me, what's the thing your family taught you about money without ever saying it out loud? The unspoken rule. The look on someone's face when a bill came in the mail. The thing you swore you'd do differently, and maybe have, or maybe haven't yet. I read those comments. Every single one. And more often than you'd expect, the most honest ones come from people exactly like you. Capable, tired, carrying more than they let on, finally saying out loud what they've never said to anyone, because a stranger on the other side of a screen somehow feels safer than the people closest to them. You don't owe me that comment, but if you write it, I promise you, someone else reading it tonight will feel a little less alone. That's worth more than any algorithm. Now, let's get back to where we were, because there's one more layer I need you to see clearly before we close tonight. We've talked about the thermostat. We've talked about the maze the banks built around you. We've talked about the 72-hour rule and the emotional inheritance sitting underneath every purchase you've ever made. But there's a question we haven't asked yet, and it's the one that actually determines whether anything changes from here forward. What are you protecting when you avoid looking at your money? I don't mean that as a trick question. I mean it literally. Every avoidance protects something. When you don't check your balance, you're protecting yourself from a feeling, shame, maybe, or fear, or the exhaustion of facing something that feels bigger than you. When you keep making the same purchase that quiets a bad day, you're protecting yourself from sitting with whatever the bad day actually made you feel. Avoidance isn't weakness. I need you to really hear that. Avoidance is a strategy, and at some point in your life, it worked. It got you through a hard year. It got you through a marriage that was falling apart, or a job loss, or a parent's illness, or a version of yourself that simply couldn't carry one more hard truth at the time. Your avoidance kept you standing. But the strategy that kept you standing at 28 is not the same strategy that will build the life you want at 50. What protected you once can quietly become the very thing holding you back now. That's not a failure. That's just a strategy outliving its usefulness, the way a coat that kept you warm as a kid no longer fits the adult wearing it. So here's the shift I want to offer you, gently. Because this is the last real turn before we bring this all the way home tonight. You don't need to become a different person to fix this. You don't need some dramatic reinvention, a new identity, a 5-year plan written on a whiteboard. You need something much smaller and much harder in a different way. You need to look Just look. At the number, at the pattern, at the feeling that rises when you finally do. Looking doesn't fix anything by itself. But nothing gets fixed without it. Every person who has ever turned their financial life around at any age started in the exact same place you're sitting in right now. Not with a solution, but with a willingness to finally see clearly what they'd spent years looking away from. That's the door. It's right in front of you. And unlike everything the banks built, this door was never locked. You were just told, somewhere along the way, that it was too painful to open. It isn't. Not anymore. Not tonight. And once that door opens, even a crack, something practical starts to shift too. You start noticing where the thermostat resets you. You start recognizing the friction the banks removed on purpose, and you start adding a little of your own back in. A pause before checkout, a question before a purchase, a real look at the statement instead of a quick scroll past it. None of it dramatic. All of it compounding, the same way debt compounds against you, except now it's compounding for you instead of against you, quietly, the way most real change actually happens. Let's come back to where we started tonight. The thermostat. You know now that it's real. You know it was set by people who loved you, or people who were simply doing their best with what they had, long before you could understand what they were teaching you without ever saying a word. You know the coffee was never the villain. That ghost subscriptions, lifestyle creep, and quiet installment payments have been doing the real damage, while you blamed a $5 cup for problems it never caused. You know the banks built a maze, not out of malice, but out of incentive, and that seeing the walls is the first step toward walking through them differently. You know the 72-hour rule, not as a gimmick, but as a way of creating space between the flinch and the decision. And you know, maybe for the first time tonight, that being smart and being broke were never contradictions. They were just two different systems, running side by side, finally being introduced to each other. None of this was ever really about money. Not underneath. It was about the gap between who you are and who you were taught to believe you could afford to be. I think about the people I've talked to over the years. Smart, tired, capable people just like you, who spent decades treating their bank balance like a verdict on their worth as a person. As if the number in that account was a final judgment on how hard they'd worked, how well they'd loved, how much they mattered to the people around them. It isn't. It was never that. It's just a number, shaped by 100 small decisions, most of which were made by a version of you who didn't yet have the map you're holding now. Some of you watching this have carried that verdict for 30 years. You've hidden statements from a spouse. You've smiled through a family dinner while doing silent math in your head about a payment due Friday. You've told yourself quietly, more times than you'd ever admit out loud, that a smarter, more disciplined version of you would have already fixed this by now. I want you to let that go tonight. Not because the situation isn't real. It is, and it deserves your full attention. But because the story you've been telling yourself about what your struggle means was never true. It was never a verdict. It was a pattern. And patterns, unlike verdicts, can change. You do now. I'm not going to pretend one video changes a lifetime of patterns. That would be its own kind of lie, and I promised you at the start I wouldn't sell you easy answers. But something did shift here tonight, even if it's small, even if you can't quite name it yet. You looked at something you've been avoiding. You let yourself feel the weight of it. instead of pushing it down for one more day. And that, more than any spreadsheet, more than any budgeting app, more than any advice from a stranger on a stage, that's where change actually begins. Think about what it would mean, a year from now, to check your account and feel nothing but calm. Not excitement, not dread, just calm. The quiet kind that comes from finally knowing where you stand. That's not a fantasy reserved for people who started with more than you did. It's available to anyone willing to look, and to keep looking, especially on the days it would be easier not to. That's the whole secret, if there is one. Not intensity, just honesty. Repeated ordinary Tuesday after ordinary Tuesday until it becomes who you are instead of something you're trying to become. The thermostat doesn't move because you yell at it. It moves because, slowly, patiently, you show it a new normal, over and over, until the new normal is the only one it remembers. That's not a metaphor for tonight. That's a metaphor for the rest of your life, if you let it be. So here's what I'll ask of you, simply, before you go. If this reached you tonight, if even one sentence in the last hour made you feel a little less alone in something you thought was only your failure, subscribe to this channel and share this with 5 people who need to hear it as much as you did. Not because sharing helps me, because somewhere in your life, there's someone carrying the exact same weight. Quietly, tonight, convinced they're the only one who feels this way. They're not. And you might be the reason they find that out. Leave a comment below, honestly, no performance, no need to sound like you have it figured out. Tell me where you are right now, tonight, with your money and with yourself. And tell me what you want me to talk about next. Because this channel isn't built for me. It's built for this conversation, the one we're having right now, to keep going, one honest video at a time. Maybe you want to hear about how to finally have the money conversation with a partner who avoids it as much as you used to. Maybe you want to know what to do when you're starting this at 55 instead of 25, and the clock feels louder than it used to. Maybe you just want more of exactly this. Someone talking to you like an adult, without the shame, without the hustle and grind noise the rest of the internet seems addicted to. Tell me. I'm listening. I'll be here tomorrow. And so, I hope will you.